Marcus Chun had been in chains for 347 days. He counted each sunrise through the small window of his cell, marking another day of captivity on the cold metal walls with his fingernails. The Zephyrian Empire had taken him during the Battle of Kepler Station, along with dozens of other human prisoners. Most had died in the first month. The alien prison ship Dominance was a massive fortress of black metal and cruel efficiency. Its corridors stretched for miles, filled with the screams and desperate pleas of prisoners from 100 different worlds. The Zephyrians collected sentient beings like trophies, breaking their spirits before selling them as slaves across the galaxy. Marcus had watched friends die. He had seen proud warriors reduced to whimpering shadows. He had witnessed the Zephyrians' favorite torture method, slow psychological breakdown through isolation, starvation, and the constant threat of death. But Marcus Chin remained silent. He spoke to no one, answered no questions, and gave his captors nothing but cold, defiant stares. The other prisoners whispered about him in the brief moments when the guards weren't watching. They called him the Silent One or the Ghost. Some thought he had lost his mind. Others believed he was planning something. But Marcus simply endured, his hatred growing stronger with each passing day. Commander Vextar was the prison ship's overseer, a towering Zephyrian with blue-scaled skin and forearms. His species had conquered 47 worlds in the past century, and they took great pride in breaking the will of other races. Humans were particularly prized because of their stubborn nature. When a human finally broke, it was considered a great victory. Vextar had made Marcus his personal project. Every few days, he would visit the human's cell, trying different methods to make him speak. He offered food, threatened pain, showed holographic images of Earth burning, and promised quick deaths for cooperation. Marcus never responded. He would sit on his small metal bench, stare at the wall, and ignore everything the aliens said. "You cannot remain silent forever, human," Vextar would hiss through his translator device. "Every creature breaks eventually. Even your precious Earth soldiers succumb to our methods." But Marcus had learned something important during his military training that the Zephyrians didn't understand. Silence wasn't weakness, it was power. Every word spoken gave the enemy information. Every reaction revealed something they could use against you. So Marcus had decided on the day of his capture that he would give them nothing at all. The prison ship held creatures from across the known galaxy. There were the crystalline Nethans, who communicated through light patterns and had been enslaved for their ability to process complex mathematical equations. The furry Corvani served as translators because they could mimic any language perfectly. Tall, ethereal Selenites were prized for their precognitive abilities, able to see brief glimpses of possible futures. All of them had been broken by the Zephyrians. All of them worked as slaves, their eyes empty of hope. They moved through the ship's corridors like ghosts, performing whatever tasks their masters demanded. The sight of them only strengthened Marcus's resolve to remain silent. In his cell, Marcus maintained his military discipline as best he could. He exercised in the small space, doing push-ups, sit-ups, and stretching to keep his body strong. He meditated to keep his mind sharp. He reviewed every detail of his capture, analyzing what had gone wrong and what he might have done differently. The Battle of Kepler Station had been a massacre. The human fleet was outnumbered 10-1, but they had fought with desperate courage. Marcus commanded a destroyer called Vengeance, and his crew had taken down 3 Zephyrian cruisers before enemy boarding pods breached their hull. The fighting in the corridors was brutal and close quarters, with energy weapons lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. When the ship's core was about to explode, Marcus had ordered his surviving crew to the escape pods. He stayed behind to manually trigger the self-destruct, hoping to take a few more enemy ships with him. But the Zephyrians had been faster than expected. A boarding party stunned him just seconds before he could complete the sequence. He woke up in chains, his ship and crew gone forever. The memory of their sacrifice burned in his chest every day. 38 good people had died under his command, and he had failed them by getting captured instead of dying with honor. The guilt was a constant companion, but he channeled it into determination. He would not dishonor their memory by breaking under torture. Months passed in the same routine. Wake up, count the sunrise, exercise, meditate, endure whatever psychological torture Vextar had planned for the day, sleep, and repeat. The alien commander grew increasingly frustrated with his lack of progress. Other prisoners were broken within weeks, but the human remained as silent and defiant as ever. "Perhaps you need to see what happens to those who resist us too long," Vextar said one day, his 4 arms gesturing dramatically. He activated a holographic display showing footage of human colonies under attack. Cities burned, children screamed, and desperate defenders fell under overwhelming alien firepower. Marcus watched without expression. Inside, his heart raged at the images, but he gave no outward sign of emotion. Vextar studied his face carefully, looking for any crack in the human's composure. "Your Earth forces are falling back on every front," the alien continued. "Soon, your entire species will serve the Empire. Would you not like to speak with your family one last time before they join you in chains?" Still, Marcus said nothing. He had no family left. His parents died in a transport accident years ago, and he had never married. The military had been his only family, and they were gone. But even if he had loved ones to worry about, he would not have given Vextar the satisfaction of a response. The Zephyrian commander's frustration was becoming obvious. His blue scales darkened with anger, and his 4 hands clenched into fists. In their culture, silence was considered an insult of the highest order. Communication was sacred to them, and refusing to speak was like spitting on everything they believed. "You will break, human," Vextar snarled before leaving the cell. "I have eternity to work on you." But Marcus knew something that Vextar didn't. Time was not on the alien's side. Every day that passed without breaking a human prisoner was a sign of weakness. Other commanders in the Zephyrian fleet would begin to question Vextar's effectiveness. Eventually, he would be replaced, and Marcus might have a chance to escape in the confusion. The prison ship traveled through various systems, picking up new prisoners and delivering others to slave markets. Marcus learned to recognize the different types of hyperspace jumps by the subtle vibrations they caused in his cell walls. Short jumps meant they were moving within a system. Long jumps indicated travel between stars. Very long jumps suggested they were crossing into new sectors entirely. During one particularly long journey, Marcus noticed something unusual. The ship's engines seemed to be straining more than normal. The vibrations were different, almost rhythmic, as if they were fighting against some kind of resistance. He filed the observation away for future consideration. Other prisoners sometimes tried to communicate with him during the brief periods when they were moved through the corridors for medical examinations or work assignments. A Nethan might flash a quick light pattern asking if he was all right. A Corvani would whisper words of encouragement in broken human language. But Marcus never acknowledged them, afraid that any response might be monitored and used against both him and them. The isolation was the hardest part. Humans were social creatures, and being cut off from all communication was torture in itself. Marcus sometimes found himself talking to his reflection in the small mirror above his cell's tiny sink, just to hear a human voice. But he always stopped himself quickly, afraid that the guards might hear and report his weakness to Vextar. One day, everything changed. Marcus was lying on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Earth's blue skies, when the ship suddenly shuddered to a halt. Emergency lights began flashing, and he could hear the distant sound of alarms throughout the massive vessel. Through his small window, Marcus saw something that made his heart race for the first time in months. Ships, human ships, moving in perfect formation and firing precisely coordinated salvos at the Zephyrian fleet. The rescue force had found them, but his excitement was short-lived. Even if the humans won this battle, he was still locked in a cell deep inside an enemy ship. The chances of surviving whatever was about to happen were very small. Zephyrian policy was to kill all prisoners rather than let them be rescued. As the battle raged outside, guards began moving through the prison levels with weapons drawn. Marcus could hear the distinctive sound of energy weapons firing and prisoners screaming. They were executing everyone systematically, starting with the levels farthest from his own. Marcus stood up and moved to his cell door, listening carefully to the approaching sounds of death. He had perhaps 10 minutes before they reached his section. 10 minutes to live, unless he could think of something clever. The cell door was electronically locked and reinforced with physical bars. The walls were solid metal, too thick to break through even if he had tools. The small window was barely wide enough for a hand to fit through, and it was covered with an energy barrier that would burn anything trying to pass through it. But Marcus had spent nearly a year studying every detail of his prison. He knew exactly how the locking mechanism worked, having watched guards open and close it thousands of times. He knew the timing of the electronic cycle that controlled the energy barrier on his window. And he knew something else that might be useful. The guards wore personal communication devices that were keyed to their individual biometric signatures. If he could get his hands on one of those devices, he might be able to access other ship systems. It was a desperate plan, but desperation was all he had left. Marcus positioned himself beside the door and waited. The sound of execution squads was getting closer, moving methodically through each level. Soon, he would hear them on his own corridor. When they opened his cell door to kill him, he would have one chance to fight back. The wait seemed endless. Outside his window, the space battle continued with flashes of light and the distant rumble of explosions. Human and Zephyrian ships danced their deadly dance among the stars while Marcus prepared to make his own last stand. Finally, he heard boots in the corridor outside. Multiple guards, moving with military precision. They were checking each cell, confirming that prisoners were dead before moving on. Marcus could hear the energy weapons charging up and firing, followed by the dull thud of bodies hitting the floor. They were 3 cells away, 2 cells away, 1 cell away. The electronic lock on Marcus's door cycled through its opening sequence. After nearly a year of silence, it was time for the human to speak. But he wouldn't be speaking words. As the cell door slid open, Marcus Chen finally broke his silence with a roar of pure fury that had been building for 347 days. The first Zephyrian guard never saw it coming. Marcus's fist connected with the alien's throat with the force of nearly a year's worth of suppressed rage. The guard's 4 arms flailed wildly as he collapsed, his weapon clattering across the metal floor. The second guard had just enough time to raise his energy rifle before Marcus was on him. 347 days of push-ups and exercise in a tiny cell had kept the human in fighting shape, and now all that pent-up strength exploded outward like a dam bursting. Marcus grabbed the weapon's barrel and twisted, using the alien's own momentum to slam him into the corridor wall. The satisfying crack of breaking bones echoed through the narrow space. Without hesitation, Marcus snatched the guard's communication device from his belt and dove back into his cell as more guards came running. Energy bolts sizzled past his head as he activated the stolen communicator. The device's holographic interface flickered to life, displaying options in flowing Zephyrian script. Marcus had spent months listening to the guards talk, picking up fragments of their language. Now he desperately searched through the device's menu system, looking for anything that might help. The prison ship's internal communication network opened before him like a digital map. He could see status reports, guard positions, and, most importantly, the ship's automated systems. With trembling fingers, he accessed the environmental controls. Outside his cell, the guards were setting up a position to storm his hiding place. But Marcus wasn't planning to wait for them. He found the atmospheric control system and began typing commands as fast as he could, changing the gas mixture in the prison levels to something the Zephyrians couldn't breathe. The effect was almost immediate. Shouts of alarm echoed through the corridors as the guards began choking on the suddenly toxic air. Emergency protocols kicked in, sealing off the prison sections to prevent the contamination from spreading to the rest of the ship. Marcus had effectively trapped himself, but he had also bought precious time. Through the ship's communication system, he could monitor the space battle raging outside. The human fleet was holding its own, but they were still outnumbered. More importantly, he could see the ship's internal security status. Blast doors were sealing throughout the vessel, emergency power was kicking in, and automated systems were trying to deal with multiple crises at once. Marcus found what he was looking for in the ship's prisoner database. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds were held throughout the massive vessel, and many of them had valuable skills. If he could free them and coordinate their efforts, they might have a chance to take control of the ship from the inside. But first, he needed to get out of his cell. The door controls were linked to the same system as the communicator. Marcus studied the electronic lock's programming, looking for weaknesses. The Zephyrians had built their prison to keep people in, not to keep them from accessing internal systems if they somehow got their hands on command codes. It took several tries, but eventually the lock clicked open. Marcus stepped into the corridor, breathing the toxic air that would kill any Zephyrian who tried to follow him. Bodies of guards lay scattered around his cell, victims of their own security protocols. The communicator's map showed him the fastest route to the main prison control center. If he could reach it, he would be able to open every cell in the ship simultaneously. The journey would take him through sections of the vessel he had never seen, past automated security systems, and potentially more guards. Marcus moved quickly through the narrow corridors, his bare feet silent on the metal flooring. The ship was beautiful in its own terrifying way, all flowing curves and organic-looking architecture that seemed almost alive. Zephyrian design philosophy emphasized harmony between technology and nature, creating spaces that felt like the inside of some massive creature. He passed through sections where other prisoners were held. Through reinforced windows, he could see Nethans huddled together, their crystalline bodies dim with despair. Corvani paced in their cells like caged animals, their fur matted and dirty. Selenites sat motionless, their large eyes staring at nothing, lost in visions of possible futures that all ended in death. Each sight strengthened Marcus's resolve. These beings had been torn from their homes, separated from their families, and broken by systematic cruelty. If he could free them, they could work together to turn the tables on their captors. The prison control center was heavily fortified, but the guards inside were dealing with multiple emergencies. Marcus could hear them shouting at each other through the thick doors, trying to coordinate responses to the atmospheric contamination, the space battle, and now reports of a prisoner loose in the corridors. Marcus found a maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the control room. The shaft was barely wide enough for a human, but it gave him access to the center's power supply. Using the stolen communicator, he interfaced with the ship's maintenance systems and began rerouting power throughout the prison sections. The lights went out all at once, plunging the entire prison level into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, but the disruption was enough to create chaos in the control room. Marcus could hear the guards scrambling to restore full power while dealing with reports from throughout the ship. In the darkness, Marcus slipped out of the maintenance shaft and positioned himself outside the control room's secondary entrance. The guards had left it unlocked in their rush to deal with the power crisis. He waited until he could hear them all clustered around the main control panel, then stepped inside. The control room was a marvel of alien technology. Holographic displays showed the status of every system throughout the massive ship. Marcus could see the prison levels, the engine sections, the bridge, and even the ongoing space battle outside. The human fleet had managed to destroy several Zephyrian ships, but they were still badly outnumbered. 3 guards stood with their backs to him, frantically trying to restore normal operations. Marcus moved like a shadow, using techniques he had learned in military training. The first guard went down silently, unconscious before he hit the floor. The second managed a surprised yelp before Marcus's chokehold put him to sleep. The third spun around just in time to meet a fist that had been dreaming of this moment for nearly a year. With the control room secured, Marcus turned his attention to the main computer system. The interface was complex, but he had been observing Zephyrian technology for months. Their computers were intuitive, designed to respond to natural gestures and simple commands. He found the master control for all prison cells throughout the ship. Thousands of indicators showed locked doors, active security fields, and monitored life signs. With a single command, Marcus could free every prisoner simultaneously. But he hesitated. If he opened all the cells at once, chaos would follow. Many of the prisoners were weak from captivity and wouldn't be able to fight effectively. Others might panic and interfere with any organized resistance. He needed to be more strategic. Instead, Marcus accessed the prisoner database and began studying the files. Each entry contained detailed information about the captive's species, abilities, and background. He looked for those who had military training, technical skills, or natural advantages that could be useful in a fight. A Nethan engineer who had designed starship power systems. A Corvani warrior who had led resistance movements on 3 different worlds. A group of Selenite navigators whose precognitive abilities could predict enemy movements. These were the beings he needed to free first. Marcus began opening cells selectively, starting with the prisoners who could help him coordinate a larger escape effort. He used the ship's communication system to send messages to each newly freed prisoner, explaining the situation and giving them basic instructions. The response was immediate and gratifying. The Neton engineer began working on the ship's power systems, finding ways to disrupt Zephyrian operations without destroying critical life support. The Corvani warriors started organizing other fighters among the freed prisoners. The Selenite navigators warned him about incoming security teams and suggested the best routes to avoid them. Working together, they began to systematically take control of the prison ship from the inside. Small teams of liberated prisoners captured guard stations, secured weapons, and freed even more captives. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting a war on multiple fronts, the human fleet outside, and a growing rebellion within their own vessel. Commander Vextar's voice echoed through the ship's communication system, demanding reports and threatening terrible punishments for anyone who failed to contain the uprising. But his authority was crumbling as more and more of his ship fell under prisoner control. Marcus made his way toward the bridge, followed by a growing army of freed captives. Each species contributed their unique abilities to the effort. Netons hacked computer systems with their natural mathematical abilities. Corvani translated between different groups and coordinated attacks. Selenites provided early warning of enemy movements. The corridors became battlefields as Zephyrian security forces tried to stop the advancing prisoners. But the aliens were used to dealing with broken, demoralized captives, not organized resistance from beings who had nothing left to lose. Energy weapons lit up the ship's corridors like deadly fireworks. Aliens and former prisoners fell on both sides, but the momentum was clearly shifting. The prisoners knew the ship's layout from their captivity, and they fought with the desperation of people who had already endured the worst their enemies could do. As they advanced through the ship, Marcus began to understand the full scope of the Zephyrian operation. This wasn't just a prison ship, it was a mobile slave processing facility. Thousands of beings were held in different sections, sorted by species and abilities, prepared for sale to various markets across the galaxy. The sight filled him with cold fury. These weren't just soldiers captured in battle. They were families torn apart, children taken from their parents, entire civilizations reduced to merchandise. The Zephyrians weren't just conquering worlds. They were destroying the very concept of freedom across the galaxy. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the power of hope. Every prisoner they freed became a fighter. Every alien who remembered their home world became a weapon against tyranny. The ship that had been designed to break spirits was now becoming a symbol of resistance. Marcus reached a major intersection in the ship's corridors and paused to check the stolen communicator. The map showed they were close to the bridge, but heavy security forces were positioned between them and their goal. At the same time, he could see that the space battle outside was reaching a critical point. The human fleet had managed to destroy or disable most of the Zephyrian escort ships, but the prison ship itself was still heavily armed and dangerous. If the freed prisoners could take control of the bridge, they could shut down the ship's weapons and help tip the balance of the battle. A Selenite navigator approached him, her large eyes glowing with the strange light that appeared when her species accessed future visions. "The path ahead is dangerous," she said in heavily accented but clear English. "Many will die in the next hour. But I see something else. I see the chains breaking. Not just ours, but chains across the galaxy." Marcus nodded grimly. He had expected casualties. Revolution was never bloodless. But if they could succeed here, if they could prove that the Zephyrian Empire could be challenged, it might inspire resistance movements on dozens of occupied worlds. The final push toward the bridge would require everything they had learned about working together. Each species would need to use their natural abilities in coordination with the others. It would be the ultimate test of whether beings from across the galaxy could unite against tyranny. As Marcus prepared his mixed army of former prisoners for the assault, he thought about the irony of his situation. He had spent nearly a year in silence, giving his captors nothing. Now he was about to give them everything, a revolution that would shake the foundations of their empire. The silent prisoner was about to become something far more dangerous. He was about to become a symbol of hope for every enslaved being in the galaxy. Marcus Chun was no longer just a captured human soldier. He was becoming the Reaper of Chains. The bridge of the prison ship Dominance was a cathedral of alien technology and arrogance. Massive view screens showed the space battle raging outside, where human ships danced between enemy fire with desperate grace. Commander Vextar stood at the center of it all, his four arms working multiple control interfaces while he screamed orders at his crew. Marcus Chun watched from the shadows of a maintenance corridor, studying the bridge layout through a small observation port. The stolen communicator had given him access to the ship's blueprints, but seeing the actual space was different. 30 Zephyrian officers worked at various stations, their blue-scaled skin reflecting the glow of holographic displays. Behind Marcus, nearly 200 freed prisoners waited in the corridors. They were an unlikely army, beings from dozens of worlds who had never fought together before, united only by their hatred of chains and their desperate hope for freedom. The Corvani warrior had organized them into mixed teams that could use each species' unique abilities. The bridge's defensive systems are formidable, whispered the Nethan engineer, her crystalline body pulsing with soft mathematical light as she analyzed the security data. Energy barriers, automated weapons, reinforced blast doors. They expected external attacks, not internal revolution. A Selenite navigator closed her large eyes, her consciousness reaching into possible futures. When she opened them again, her voice was grave. I see many paths from this moment. In most, we succeed in taking the bridge. But, in nearly all of them, the cost is terrible. Marcus nodded. He had expected this final battle to be brutal. The Zephyrians would fight desperately to maintain control, and they had the advantage of superior weapons and defensive positions. But the prisoners had advantages too. They knew the ship's layout, they had nothing to lose, and they were fighting for something more powerful than any weapon. They were fighting for the right to be free. Marcus activated the communicator and spoke to all the prisoner teams throughout the ship. After nearly a year of silence, his voice carried the weight of accumulated fury and unbreakable determination. Listen to me, all of you. In the next few minutes, we're going to end this nightmare. We're going to take back our freedom and show the galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire can be beaten. Some of us won't survive this fight, but our sacrifice will mean that others live free. Are you ready? The response came from dozens of different species, in dozens of different languages, but the meaning was universal. They were ready. Marcus led the charge personally, smashing through the bridge's secondary entrance with a group of Corvani fighters. The Zephyrian officers spun around in shock as aliens they thought were safely locked away came pouring onto their command deck. The battle was immediate and brutal. Energy weapons lit up the bridge like a deadly light show, while beings fought hand-to-hand among the control stations. The Zephyrians had superior firepower, but the prisoners had superior motivation. A blast from an alien weapon scorched the air near Marcus's head as he dove behind a control console. The surface was covered with holographic displays showing ship status, and he could see that other prisoner teams were fighting their way through the ship's defensive positions. Commander Vextar's voice rose above the chaos, screaming orders in his native language. His four arms worked frantically at a command interface, trying to activate security protocols that would seal the bridge and gas the attackers. But the Nethan engineer had already infiltrated those systems, turning the ship's own defenses against its crew. Marcus rolled out from behind cover and tackled a Zephyrian officer who was trying to activate an emergency beacon. They crashed into a navigation console, sending holographic star charts scattering like luminous snow. The alien was stronger, but Marcus had been dreaming of this moment for 347 days. Around the bridge, the tide of battle was turning. The Corvani warriors used their natural agility to outmaneuver the heavier Zephyrians. Nethan's disabled weapon systems with precise mathematical calculations fed directly into computer interfaces. Selenite navigators warned their allies about incoming attacks before they happened. But the victory was coming at a terrible cost. Bodies lay scattered across the beautiful alien deck, both prisoners and Zephyrians who had fought and died for their beliefs. The smell of burned flesh and ozone from energy weapons filled the air. Commander Vextar stood at the center of the chaos, his four arms now holding weapons instead of control interfaces. His blue scales had darkened to almost black with rage, and his eyes blazed with the fury of a being who saw his entire worldview crumbling. "You think this changes anything, human?" he snarled, pointing one of his weapons directly at Marcus. "The Empire spans 1,000 worlds. We have fleets beyond counting, armies that could crush your pathetic species like insects. This ship, these prisoners, they are nothing." Marcus stood slowly, his own captured weapon trained on the alien commander. Around them, the fighting had mostly stopped as both sides watched this final confrontation. The fate of everyone on the ship might depend on what happened in the next few seconds. "You're wrong," Marcus said quietly. His voice carried clearly across the bridge, the first words he had spoken to his captor since being imprisoned. "This ship isn't nothing. These prisoners aren't nothing. You've spent so much time breaking people that you forgot something important about living beings." Vextar's weapons never wavered. "And what is that, human?" "We remember," Marcus replied. "Every being you've enslaved remembers their home. Every family you've torn apart remembers love. Every warrior you've captured remembers honor. And when we remember, we fight." The Zephyrian commander's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Memories are nothing against the reality of power. Your human fleet is dying outside. Your Earth burns under our weapons. Your species will serve the Empire, just like all the others." But, as Vextar spoke, something changed on the bridge's main view screen. The space battle outside was shifting dramatically. The human ships that had seemed outmatched were suddenly fighting with new coordination and effectiveness. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers as Zephyrian vessels fell under precisely targeted attacks. A communication signal crackled through the bridge speakers, a human voice speaking clear, confident English. "This is Admiral Sarah Morrison of the Terran Defense Force. Prison ship dominance. Your escort fleet has been neutralized. Surrender now and prepare to be boarded." Vextar's 4 eyes went wide with disbelief. His fleet had been one of the Empire's finest, designed specifically to crush human resistance. The idea that primitive Earth ships could defeat them was almost incomprehensible. But Marcus understood what had happened. The freed prisoners hadn't just taken control of the ship, they had shut down its weapons and shields, leaving the Zephyrian fleet vulnerable to human attacks. The rescue mission had become a rout. "It's over," Marcus said simply. "Your empire may span 1,000 worlds. But today those worlds learned something new. They learned that the Zephyrian war machine can be stopped." For a long moment, the bridge was silent except for the distant sounds of battle and the hum of ship systems. Vextar stared at the view screen, watching his proud fleet burning in space. His 4 hands still held weapons, but his certainty was crumbling. Then, the Selenite navigator spoke, her voice carrying the weight of visions beyond normal perception. "I see the futures branching from this moment. The chains are breaking. Not just here, but across the galaxy. This day will be remembered on 100 worlds." Vextar turned toward her, his expression desperate. "You lie? The Empire is eternal. We have conquered for centuries. A single defeat means nothing." But the navigator's large eyes reflected truths that transcended time. "Every empire believes it is eternal until the day it falls. You have made a critical error. You believe that breaking spirits would ensure victory. But broken spirits can be healed, and healed spirits remember why they fought." Around the bridge, the freed prisoners began to move closer. They came from different worlds, spoke different languages, and followed different beliefs. But they shared one thing. They had all been broken by the Zephyrian Empire, and they had all chosen to heal rather than surrender. Marcus kept his weapon trained on Vextar, but spoke to the other prisoners. "We need him alive. The Empire needs to see their commander in chains, just like they chained us. They need to understand that their victims have become their judges." A Corvani warrior stepped forward, energy restraints in his furry hands. "It will be our pleasure to return the favor, human. This one took my cubs from me. I have dreamed of this moment for 2 years." As the restraints clicked around Vextar's 4 arms, the alien commander's face showed something Marcus had never seen before: fear. Not the healthy respect for death that warriors felt in battle, but the deep, existential terror of a being whose entire worldview had just collapsed. The main view screen showed human ships moving closer to the captured prison ship. Medical vessels and transport craft were preparing to receive the freed prisoners. But Marcus knew that the real victory was already won. Every being who had been enslaved and had fought back would carry the memory of this day to their home worlds. Marcus walked to the captain's chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor, every cell, every section of the massive vessel. For nearly a year, this ship had been a place of despair and broken hope. Now it would be remembered as the place where the chains began to break. "Attention, all prisoners," he said, and his words carried the weight of hard-won freedom. "This is Commander Marcus Chun of the Terran Defense Force. You are no longer captives. You are no longer slaves. You are free beings with the power to choose your own destiny." The response was immediate, a roar of voices from dozens of species, speaking dozens of languages, but all expressing the same emotion: joy, relief, and, underneath it all, the burning determination to ensure that this victory was just the beginning. The Nethan engineer approached Marcus, her crystalline body now glowing brightly with mathematical precision. "Commander, I have been analyzing the ship's database. There are 347 other prison ships operating throughout the galaxy. Each one carries thousands of enslaved beings." Marcus nodded grimly. The number wasn't a coincidence. He had been imprisoned for exactly that many days, as if the universe was giving him a target to aim for. "Then, we have work to do. This ship has weapons, supplies, and now a crew that knows exactly how the Empire operates. We're going to free them all." A Selenite navigator closed her eyes and reached into the streams of possibility that flowed around them. When she opened them again, she was smiling, a rare expression for her species. "I see the paths ahead more clearly now. The Zephyrian Empire will fight desperately to maintain control, but they have already lost. They broke one rule that no conqueror can survive breaking." "What rule?" Marcus asked. "They gave their enemies hope," she replied. "And hope, Commander Chun, is the most dangerous weapon in the universe." Over the following months, the captured prison ship became the nucleus of a growing resistance movement. Freed prisoners returned to their home worlds carrying news that the Empire could be beaten. Slave uprisings erupted on dozens of planets. Other prison ships were captured or destroyed by coordinated attacks from multiple species working together. Marcus Chun, the silent prisoner who had endured nearly a year of captivity, became known across the galaxy as the Reaper of Chains. But he knew the truth. He was just one person who had refused to break when breaking would have been easier. The real heroes were all the beings who had chosen to fight for freedom when freedom seemed impossible. The Zephyrian Empire did not fall overnight. Empires never do. But on the day Marcus Chun broke his silence with a roar of fury, the first crack appeared in chains that had bound the galaxy for centuries. And once the chains began to break, nothing could stop them from shattering completely. In the end, the Empire learned the same lesson that all tyrants eventually learn. You can enslave a body, but the spirit that yearns for freedom can never truly be chained. And when that spirit finds its voice, it becomes a roar that shakes the foundations of the universe itself.